Admiral Jin stood in the command center of the UES Ironwell, his coffee growing cold as he watched the same horrible message play for the 10th time. The holographic display showed a blue planet covered in what looked like black oil spreading across its surface. But Jin knew it wasn't oil. It was something much worse. The alien speaking in the recording had 6 arms and skin like purple silk. Her voice shook with terror as she spoke through the universal translator. "This is Elder Kex of the Zelari Republic. Our world is dying. The swarm has broken through our defenses. They are eating everything. Our cities, our forests, our people. If anyone receives this message, please help us. We have children here. Innocent children." The transmission cut to scenes that made Jin's stomach turn. Massive creatures that looked like a cross between spiders and starships were landing on the planet. They had metal parts mixed with flesh, and they moved like living nightmares. Wherever they touched, everything turned into gray paste that they absorbed into their bodies. "Sir, this came through official channels," said Communications Officer Yu, a young woman who had been with the fleet for only 6 months. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held the datapad. "The Galactic Council sent it to us directly." Jin almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Galactic Council had spent 30 years telling humanity to stay in their own solar system. They called Earth a death world because it was so dangerous compared to other planets. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too savage for civilized space. Human children played with toy weapons, while alien children played with toy flowers. Human sports involved hitting each other, while alien sports involved singing. Competitions. The Council had made it clear, humanity was not welcome among the stars. "They must be really desperate," Jin said quietly. "Desperate enough to ask the scary humans for help." Lieutenant Kim, the tactical officer, pulled up a star map. "Sir, the Zelari system is 4 days away, at maximum burn. But we have no idea what we're flying into. Intelligence reports say the swarm has consumed 17 worlds in the past 2 years. No one knows where they come from or how to stop them." Jin watched as the recording showed Zelari children running through burning streets. They looked almost human, except for their purple skin and extra arms. But their faces showed the same terror any human child would feel. Fear was universal, it seemed. "Sir," you said hesitantly, "should I contact the other fleet commanders?" Before Jin could answer, his personal communicator buzzed. Captain Han from the Stormbreaker appeared on the small screen, his scarred face serious. "Jin, tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." "We have 67 ships ready for immediate deployment," Jin replied. "The Zelari need help. They're not our people," Han pointed out. "We have no treaty with them, no alliance. Hell, we've never even met them before today. And need I mention that the same Galactic Council asking for help is the one that has kept us locked in our own system like dangerous animals." Jin turned to look at the main display again. A Zelari mother was carrying her small child, running from something off-screen. The child's face reminded him of his own daughter back on Earth. Different species, different world, but the same precious innocence. "Han, do you have children?" Jin asked. There was a pause. "You know I do. 2 daughters. Then you understand." Jin walked closer to the screen. "I don't care about politics or treaties or what the Council thinks of us. Those are children down there being hunted by monsters." Captain Park's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel. "All ships standing by, Admiral. Just give the word." Jin could hear the engines of his ship humming louder as the crew prepared for immediate departure. In the past hour, word had spread through the entire fleet. Human crews were checking weapons, loading ammunition, and saying quick prayers to whatever gods they believed in. This was what humans did. When someone called for help, they answered. "Signal all ships," Jin commanded. "We launch in 1 hour. Full military burn to Zelari space." "Sir," you asked quietly, "what do we tell Earth Command when they ask why we left without orders?" Jin smiled grimly as he watched his fleet prepare for war against an enemy they had never faced. To save people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. Tell them we went to remind the galaxy why they call us Deathworlders. Elder? Fixin floated in his command chamber high above the Zalari capital city, watching the scanner display with growing worry. The human fleet was still 2 hours away, but already he could see they were nothing like what he expected. Every ship in the Galactic Council fleet was beautiful. The Altarian vessels looked like silver teardrops that could slice through space. Itself, the Centaurian cruisers resembled giant flowers made of crystal and light. Even the military ships from the warrior species had graceful curves and elegant designs that showed thousands of years of refined civilization. The human ships looked like someone had taken metal boxes and stuck guns on every available surface. "Commander," his aide whispered, her 6 arms trembling as she read the tactical data. "These ships appear to be ... primitive. Look at this design." She projected a hologram of the lead human vessel. "It's just armor plated over more armor plating. Where are the energy shields? The quantum deflectors? The bioregenerating hull systems?" Thixon studied the crude human designs. The ships had names painted on their sides in bright colors: Blood Moon, Iron Fist, Thunderstrike. Even their names sounded violent. Council ships had beautiful names like Harmonies, Song, or Peaceful Dawn. These humans named their vessels after weapons and storms. "Perhaps," Thixon said slowly, "we should not have called for help. These beings may be more dangerous than the swarm itself." 2 hours away, Captain Sue walked through the corridors of her destroyer Blood Moon. The ship was cramped compared to alien vessels. Every wall was covered in pipes, cables, and backup systems. Where council ships relied on advanced technology, human ships had 3 backups for every backup in the mess hall. Her crew was doing something that would have terrified most aliens. They were singing, "We are the sons of earth and sky." Their voices echoed through the metal halls. "We fight until the day we die." It was an old song from the Korean War, passed down through generations of human soldiers. The melody was simple, but it carried the weight of 1,000 battles fought by ordinary people who refused to surrender. Ensign Lee, barely 19 years old, was sharpening his knife while singing. Most alien species had evolved past the need for blade weapons millions of years ago. Humans still carried knives into space battles, just in case. "Ma'am," called out Tactical Officer Nam from the bridge, "we're picking up massive biosignatures ahead. The swarm fleet is bigger than we thought." Sue made her way back to the command deck. On the main screen, she could see them now. The swarm ships didn't look like ships at all. They were living creatures the size of skyscrapers, covered in metal, plates and weapon ports that looked like infected wounds. They moved through space like giant insects, their biomechanical parts pulsing with sick light. "How many?" Sue asked. 47 capital ships, Nam reported, plus hundreds of smaller attack forms. "Ma'am, they outnumber us 3-1. Around the bridge, her crew looked at the overwhelming enemy force. Any sane species would have turned around and fled. Instead, the humans began checking their weapons one more time. "Signal the fleet," Sue ordered. "All ships, this is Blood Moon. Today we show the galaxy why they call Earth a death world." Far away, in the cold space between stars, something ancient and terrible felt a new sensation. The swarm had existed for millions of years, consuming world after world. Their collective mind had devoured the thoughts of 1,000 species. They knew fear, because they had tasted it in their victims. They knew despair, because they had felt it in entire civilizations as they died. But they had never felt what they were feeling now, looking at the approaching human fleet. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something else. Something that made their biomechanical hearts beat faster. The humans weren't running away. They weren't calling for help. They weren't even trying to negotiate. They were coming straight at the swarm with their crude metal boxes, singing songs about death and glory. For the first time in their species' memory, the swarm felt uncertain. They had consumed peaceful farmers and desperate warriors. They had devoured advanced civilizations and primitive tribes, but they had never encountered a species that looked at overwhelming odds and smiled. The Blood Moon led the charge, followed by 66 other human warships, all of them singing the same ancient song about sons of Earth, who fight until they die. The first shots of the battle came from the swarm, Thousands of small drones burst from their organic hulls like angry insects from a disturbed nest. Each drone was about the size of a human fighter, but instead of metal and electronics, they were made of living tissue covered in armored plates. They moved in perfect formation, spraying streams of acid that could eat through most known materials in seconds. Elder Thixon watched from his command center on the planet below, expecting to see the human fleet form defensive lines like any civilized military force. The Galactic Council had detailed battle procedures that every species followed. Ships stayed in formation, provided cover for each other, and fought as a coordinated unit. The humans did something completely different. By the ancestors, Thixon whispered as his sensors showed the human fleet suddenly breaking apart like an exploding firework. What are they doing? Instead of staying together, every human ship seemed to pick its own target and charge straight at it. The neat formation that had approached Zelari space scattered into dozens of individual battles happening all at once. Captain Juan commanded the destroyer Night Fury, a ship that looked like it had been built in someone's backyard. His vessel was smaller than most of the swarm bioships, but Juan didn't seem to care about the size difference. He aimed his ship directly between two massive swarm cruisers and punched his engines to maximum power. "Sir, we're going to take heavy fire," warned his weapons officer, Lieutenant Bay. "Good," Juan replied, gripping his command chair as acid streams began hitting his ship's hull. "That means they're not shooting at someone else." The Night Fury dove into the gap between the two bioships like a knife sliding between ribs. At point-blank range, Juan opened fire with every weapon he had. His main guns, designed to punch through asteroid armor, tore massive holes in the organic hulls of the swarm vessels. The bioships screamed, actually screamed, as Juan's weapons found vital organs hidden deep inside their living structures. The acid hitting his ship would have melted any other vessel in minutes. But human engineers had learned something important about building warships. If you can't make it perfect, make it tough enough to survive being imperfect. The Night Fury's hull was designed to take damage and keep fighting. Elder Thixon could barely believe what he was seeing. "They're fighting like they don't care if they live or die," he told his aide. "This isn't military strategy. This is madness." But the madness was working. While the swarm tried to coordinate their attacks against targets that kept changing position, the humans were adapting to every new threat in real time. High above the planet, something even more incredible was happening. Sergeant Na had led a squad of Marines in what humans called a boarding action. They had actually landed on one of the swarm bioships and were fighting inside it. The corridors of the bioship were like walking through the digestive system of a giant monster. The walls pulsed with organic life, and the air was thick with acidic mist that would have killed most alien species instantly. But Na's Marines wore sealed armor and carried weapons that could function in any environment. "Movement ahead," whispered Private COE, raising his rifle. The squad moved through the twisting passages, following the intelligence reports that had identified key nerve clusters in swarm. Bio-ships.na carried something that would have horrified most civilized species, a combat knife. While the galaxy had moved on to energy weapons and smart ammunition, humans still understood the value of a sharp piece of metal in close quarters. When they reached the main nerve center, Na didn't hesitate. She planted explosive charges on the organic computers that controlled the bioship's functions and shouted the old human battle cry, "For Earth." The explosion severed the creature's neural pathways. The massive bioship, larger than most space stations, suddenly went dark and began drifting helplessly through space. Back on the command ship, Iron Will, Admiral Jin watched his tactical display with the satisfaction of someone who understood exactly what was happening. The swarm fought like a single organism, predictable, coordinated, following patterns that had worked for millions of years. Humans fought like 67 different commanders, all trying to win their own personal war. It looked like chaos, but it was something much more dangerous. Controlled chaos guided by a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of violence. The galaxy was about to learn why. Earth was called a death world. The sky above Zelari Prime was filled with burning wreckage falling like deadly rain. Pieces of swarm bioships crashed into the purple forests, while human fighters chased the remaining enemy drones through the upper atmosphere. But the real battle was just beginning on the planet's surface. Lieutenant Park's dropship slammed into the ground outside the Zelari capital city with enough force to crack the landing pad. The doors burst open and 12 human Marines poured out, their weapons ready and their faces grim behind their helmets. The city that stretched before them looked like something from a nightmare. The buildings were tall and graceful, made from what looked like grown crystal rather than built stone. But now they were covered in the same gray slime that the swarm left wherever they fed. Zelari civilians were running through the streets, their purple skin pale with terror as they carried their children and whatever belongings they could grab. "Squad, listen up," Park shouted over the sound of explosions in the distance. "Primary mission is civilian evacuation. Secondary mission is to make these swarm bastards regret ever coming to this system." Dr. Bo, the squad's medic, was already kneeling beside a wounded Zelari child who had been separated from her family. The little girl had 6 arms like all her species, but one was clearly broken. Her large eyes were filled with tears as Bo carefully set the bone and applied a medical patch. "There you go, sweetheart," Bo said gently, even though she knew the child couldn't understand her words. The universal translator would handle the language, but Bo's tone needed no translation. Kindness was universal. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. Around the corner came something that made even the hardened Marines take a step back. It was a swarm ground unit, standing 12 feet tall and moving on 6 mechanical legs. Its body was a horrible mixture of metal and flesh, with weapon arms that ended in acid sprayers and cutting tools designed to harvest organic material. "Contact, front," Park yelled, raising his plasma rifle. The weapon fired bolts of superheated energy that could punch through tank armor, but the swarm creature absorbed the hits and kept coming. "These things don't know how to quit," observed Private Kim, as he launched a grenade that exploded against the creature's chest without slowing it down. "Then they haven't met humans before," Park replied, pulling out something that made the other soldiers grin despite their situation. It was a simple metal tube with a handle, what humans called a rocket launcher. While other species had moved on to sophisticated energy weapons, humans still believed in the power of a big explosion. The rocket hit the swarm creature's center mass and turned it into scattered pieces of metal and organic matter. But already, more were coming around the corner. "We're the species that turned war into an art form," Park said, reloading his weapon. "Time for an art lesson." High above the planet, Admiral Jin stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching his tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had already made peace with what needed to be done. The space battle was going well, but the real target hung in the center of the swarm formation like a cancer. The hive ship was enormous, larger than anything humanity had ever built. It looked like a cathedral made of living bone and metal, with thousands of smaller bioships connected to it by organic cables. This was the brain of the swarm, the central intelligence that coordinated their attacks across the galaxy. "All ships," Jin spoke into his communicator, "form up on the Iron Will. We're going straight at the hive ship. Captain Lee, commanding the escort frigate, Ghost Rider, watched in amazement as the flagship began accelerating directly toward the enemy formation. The Iron Will was charging up its experimental Nova Cannon, a weapon that had never been tested in actual combat. Sir Lee's tactical officer said with obvious concern, "The Admiral is taking his ship right into the heart of their fleet. That's suicide." Lee watched as dozens of swarm bioships moved to intercept the Iron Will, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. The human flagship was outnumbered 50-1, charging into what looked like certain death. "No," Lee said quietly, ordering his own ship to follow the Admiral into the teeth of the enemy formation. "That's not suicide, that's human." The Nova Cannon continued charging, building toward a power level that would either destroy the hive ship or tear the Iron Will apart in the process. Jin didn't seem concerned about which outcome was more likely. After all, some things were worth dying for. The moment the Nova Cannon fired, everything went white. The beam of pure energy that erupted from the Iron Will was brighter than the system's sun, and when it hit the swarm hive ship, the massive organic structure simply ceased to exist. 1 second, it was there, a cathedral of living nightmare that had coordinated the deaths of billions across the galaxy. The next second, there was nothing but expanding gas and debris, but the real destruction wasn't visible to the naked eye. The hive ship had been the brain of the entire swarm network, connected to every bioship and ground unit across multiple star systems. When it died, the psychic scream that followed could be felt by every living creature within 100 light-years. On Zelari Prime, Lieutenant Park watched in amazement as the swarm ground units that had been pressing their attack suddenly stopped moving. The 12-foot-tall killing machines that had shown no fear, no hesitation, and no mercy just moments before now stood frozen like broken toys. "What's happening to them?" asked Private Kim, keeping his weapon trained on the nearest creature. The swarm units began to shake, then collapse. Without the central intelligence guiding them, they were just collections of metal and flesh with no purpose. Within minutes, every swarm force across the system was either fleeing in panic or shutting down completely. "We did it," Dr. Bo said quietly, still holding the Zelari child she had been treating. The little girl looked up at her with eyes full of wonder, as if she couldn't believe the monsters were really gone in space. The remaining swarm bioships were scattering in all directions, their coordinated attack formation broken. They moved like animals running from a predator, no longer the unified force that had conquered 17 worlds. The collective mind that had made them so dangerous was dead, and now they were just individual creatures trying to survive. Admiral Jin woke up in the medical bay of his ship 3 hours later. The radiation from the Nova Cannon discharge had nearly killed him, and Dr. Shin was running medical scanners over his body while shaking her head in disapproval. "You're lucky to be alive," she told him. "The radiation levels on the bridge when that cannon fired should have been fatal. Did we get it?" Jin asked weakly. "Sir, the hive ship is completely destroyed," reported Communications Officer Yu from the doorway. "The swarm forces are in full retreat. We've won." Before Jin could respond, Elder Thixon entered the medical bay. The Zelari leader moved slowly, as if he was still processing what he had witnessed. His species had been part of the Galactic Council for over 1,000 years, and in all that time, no one had ever defeated the swarm in direct combat. "Admiral Jin," Thixon began, his translator working overtime to convey concepts that his species had no words for. "Your sacrifice has saved our world. Our entire civilization owes you a debt that can never be repaid." The alien leader's 6 arms spread wide in what Jin assumed was a gesture of respect. "We offer you formal alliance, territory in our system, access to our resources, anything you desire." Jin tried to sit up, waving off Dr. Shin's protests. "Elder Thixon, we appreciate the offer, but we don't fight for payment. We fight because it's the right thing to do." The Zelari leader stared at him in confusion. "But why? You had no obligation to help us. We are strangers to your species. Your own Galactic Council has kept you isolated because they fear you. Why? Would you risk your lives for people you have never met? Before Jin could answer, you stepped forward with her datapad. Her expression was serious as she read the incoming messages. Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from across the galaxy. 17 different systems are calling for help. Some are under attack by pirates, others are facing natural disasters, and 3 are reporting unknown alien threats. Jin looked at the datapad, then at Elder Thixon. Despite his injuries, he was already thinking about which ships were ready for immediate deployment and how quickly they could reach the nearest crisis. That's why, Jin said simply. Because someone has to answer when good people call for help. The universe is a dangerous place, and if the strong don't protect the weak, then what's the point of being strong? He struggled to his feet, ignoring Dr. Shin's objections. That's what humans do, Elder Thixon. We help people who need helping. As the human fleet prepared to depart Zelarai space, Elder Thixon watched from his command center with new understanding. He had always wondered why the Galactic Council feared humanity so much. Now he knew it wasn't because humans were violent or dangerous. It was because they were incorruptible. The human ships disappeared into hyperspace one by one, heading towards 17 different emergencies across the galaxy. They left behind a world that would never forget the day the Deathworlders had arrived not as conquerors, but as saviors. And across the galaxy, the word was already spreading. If you needed help, call the humans. They would come.